A lesson in compassion. The operating room buzzed with the hum of medical equipment and the steady beep of monitors, creating a rhythm that signaled the heartbeat of the hospital. Memorial General was one of the city's most prestigious medical centers, and its skilled team of doctors and nurses dedicated themselves to providing life-saving care day in and day out. However, on this particular day, something far more profound than surgery was about to take place within its sterile walls. Dr. Terrence Hammond, known to all as Dr. Terry, stood over the operating table, his hands deftly maneuvering surgical instruments with the precision of a seasoned professional. Dr. Terry was a renowned surgeon with over 25 years of experience, having recently transferred from a prominent medical center in another city. His surgical skills were beyond reproach, and his reputation preceded him. However, along with his technical expertise came a brusque, sometimes unyielding personality. He was known for his no-nonsense approach, his high standards, and, unfortunately, his lack of tolerance for anything or anyone that he perceived as a distraction. On the other side of the table was Nurse Martha Johnson, a well-respected and skilled nurse whose calm and compassionate demeanor had made her beloved among the hospital staff. Her experience and dedication matched those of Dr. Terry, but her approach to patient care was different. She valued empathy and teamwork, always seeking to foster a collaborative environment for the benefit of her patients. Martha had been called in at the last minute to assist in this surgery after another nurse had to leave suddenly for a family emergency. She accepted the call without hesitation, knowing that her presence was needed to support the team and ensure the patient's safety. As she entered the operating room, her heart was focused solely on her duty. She took a deep breath, preparing herself for the delicate procedure and the hours that lay ahead. "I'm here to assist, Dr. Hammond," Martha announced calmly, her voice professional and steady despite the surgical mask that covered her face. She stood ready, aware of every movement within the sterile environment and waiting for the doctor's instructions. Dr. Terry barely looked up, his eyes trained on his work. A flicker of irritation passed over his face as he acknowledged her. "Just follow my lead. I don't need any disruptions," he muttered, his tone dismissive. Martha nodded, unfazed. She moved with a quiet efficiency, monitoring the patient's vitals and ensuring everything on the equipment read within safe parameters. Her years of experience allowed her to anticipate each of Dr. Terry's needs, and she responded quickly, making sure each step of the procedure went smoothly. "Clamp," Dr. Terry commanded, extending his hand without looking. Martha immediately selected the appropriate clamp from the sterile instrument tray and extended it to him. Just as she handed over the tool, her elbow brushed lightly against his sleeve. A small, inadvertent touch in the tightly spaced operating area. But to Dr. Terry, it was an offense that could not be ignored. Dr. Terry's reaction was swift and unfiltered. He recoiled, his gaze hardening behind his surgical mask as he shot her a look of disdain. "Watch where you're going," he snapped, his voice harsh and biting. "I don't need anyone contaminating my sterile field. Stand back. At least 3 feet unless absolutely necessary." Martha was taken aback, but held her ground, suppressing the flicker of frustration that surfaced within her. She knew it was best to maintain her professionalism, especially during a critical procedure. Her role was to support, not to engage in disputes, especially with someone as volatile as Dr. Terry. The other staff members in the room exchanged brief, concerned glances, aware of the growing tension in the room. For a moment, the silence was almost deafening, only broken by the rhythmic beep of the monitors. "Understood, Dr. Hammond," Martha replied, her voice steady and respectful. She took a slight step back, giving him the space he demanded. Dr. Terry said nothing further, redirecting his focus to the operation. However, his temper continued to simmer, his movements quick and tense. To him, Martha's presence was more of an inconvenience than an asset, a sentiment he didn't bother to hide. It wasn't lost on him, or on anyone else, that his irritation was more than professional. In his eyes, Martha was simply not worthy of his respect, not just because she was new to his operating room, but for reasons he himself may not have fully admitted. His prejudice clouded his perception, and it fueled a belief that she was beneath him, both professionally and personally. Dr. Terry was the kind of man who believed his years of experience granted him authority over others, especially those he saw as less qualified or different. This unspoken bias tainted his attitude and influenced his every interaction with her. For Martha, this behavior wasn't new. She had encountered people like Dr. Terry before, individuals who judged her capabilities based on factors she couldn't control, her gender, her race, or simply their preconceived notions about who she was. She had spent her career proving her dedication, her skill, and her ability to rise above such judgments. But in this moment, as she continued her role, she couldn't help but feel the sting of his words, a reminder of the biases she had fought against for years. As the surgery proceeded, Dr. Terry's irritability seemed to intensify with every minor interaction. He snapped commands, berated Martha for supposed missteps, and generally displayed a level of hostility that bordered on unprofessionalism. Yet Martha remained calm, her focus unwavering, her attention on the patient, and on completing the surgery without incident. Finally, the surgery reached its closing stages, and Dr. Terry began suturing the final incision. Martha breathed a quiet sigh of relief, ready to finish her tasks and leave the charged atmosphere of the operating room behind. But as she turned to check the monitors one last time, Dr. Terry abruptly shifted his hand, brushing against her in what should have been a simple, unremarkable movement. However, this time, it was Dr. Terry who reacted impulsively. "Do you even know what you're doing here?" He spat, his voice dripping with contempt. "Maybe you should spend more time learning your job instead of making a mess in my operating room." The words stung, each one a deliberate insult aimed at her competence and dignity. Martha clenched her hands, fighting the urge to respond. She reminded herself that she was here to serve her patients, not to validate anyone's prejudice. But her silence only seemed to fuel Dr. Terry's disdain. At that moment, however, a figure appeared at the glass-paneled door of the operating room. It was Dr. Samuel Johnson, the hospital's chief medical officer and Martha's husband. Unknown to Dr. Terry, Dr. Johnson had arrived quietly, having been notified of the surgery's progress and having heard, through whispers among the staff, of Dr. Terry's behavior toward Martha. Dr. Johnson stood silently, observing the scene, his expression one of calm resolve. He had always known his wife to be the embodiment of professionalism and grace, and seeing her subjected to such treatment was both painful and infuriating. Yet he maintained his composure, choosing to wait for the right moment to make his presence known. Dr. Terry, still oblivious to the onlooker, continued his barrage of thinly veiled insults, seemingly unaware that karma, in the form of Martha's protective and influential husband, was watching closely. As the surgery came to a close and the other staff members began cleaning up, Dr. Johnson finally entered the room, his gaze fixed on Dr. Terry. The silence that followed was heavy with anticipation, a prelude to the reckoning that was about to unfold. Dr. Terry barely noticed the man who entered the room. He was too busy issuing curt instructions to the remaining staff as he wrapped up the surgery. Martha, however, instantly recognized the tall, composed figure of her husband, Dr. Samuel Johnson, standing at the doorway. Beneath his calm demeanor, she could sense the restrained fire in his eyes, a look she had come to recognize over the years they had been together. The few remaining staff members straightened when they saw Dr. Johnson. As the hospital's chief medical officer, Dr. Johnson commanded respect, not through intimidation, but through the dedication, compassion, and fairness he showed to his colleagues. He had earned his position through hard work and a commitment to fostering an inclusive, supportive environment. Yet, his gentle demeanor often left him underestimated, especially by those who, like Dr. Terry, judged others by rigid standards and superficial characteristics. As the surgery officially concluded and the staff began to clear the operating room, Dr. Johnson walked forward, stopping at the edge of the surgical field. He kept his gaze steady on Dr. Terry, who finally looked up, frowning slightly at the unexpected visitor. "Dr. Hammond, I hope everything went smoothly with the procedure." Dr. Johnson's tone was even, but there was a firmness in his voice that hinted at more than just a casual inquiry. Dr. Terry, clearly unaware of Dr. Johnson's connection to Martha, responded dismissively. "The surgery went as expected, but I can't say the same for the assistance I received." His gaze flickered toward Martha with barely concealed disdain. "Frankly, I don't know who thought it appropriate to send someone so unfit for this level of work." Martha felt the sting of his words, though she maintained her composure. She had dealt with far worse in her career, and over time, she learned to rise above such judgments. But Dr. Johnson's reaction was swift. His face tightened slightly, though his voice remained calm and controlled. "Dr. Hammond," Dr. Johnson began, choosing his words carefully, "in this hospital, we value each member of our team. Our nurses, especially, are selected based on their skills, dedication, and experience. Nurse Martha Johnson happens to be one of the most skilled nurses here. I'd advise you to reconsider any assumptions you may have about her capabilities." Dr. Terry blinked, taken aback by the sudden defense. For a moment, he seemed lost for words, glancing between Martha and Dr. Johnson, trying to gauge the nature of this unexpected solidarity. His surprise quickly shifted to indignation as he drew himself up, his tone growing defensive. "Listen, Dr. Johnson," Dr. Terry began, his voice laced with irritation. "I don't mean to question your assessment of her abilities, but I'm the one in charge in my operating room. And in my experience, any lapse in precision, any distraction, can compromise the outcome of a surgery. I simply can't tolerate unprofessional behavior." Martha, who had kept silent through the exchange, found herself glancing toward her husband. She could see the steely resolve in his eyes. Her husband had always been her advocate, but he also knew she preferred to handle situations independently. This time, however, she sensed something different, a deeper determination to confront Dr. Terry's behavior head-on. "I understand the need for precision," Dr. Johnson replied, his voice calm but unwavering. "I've been in the operating room myself more times than I can count. But what I don't understand is the lack of respect I'm seeing here, Dr. Hammond. This isn't about professionalism. It's about the assumptions you're making without reason or fairness." Dr. Terry's jaw clenched, his eyes flashing with a mixture of anger and confusion. He was unaccustomed to being challenged, especially in such a direct manner. He opened his mouth to respond, but Dr. Johnson continued, his tone growing even firmer. "In this hospital, Dr. Hammond, we believe in treating everyone with respect, regardless of their role, background, or experience. We don't tolerate condescension or prejudice in any form. And if there's one thing I won't stand for, it's seeing one of our staff members demeaned because of someone else's misconceptions." Dr. Terry, now visibly rattled, attempted to regain control of the conversation. "Are you implying that I'm prejudiced?" His voice shook slightly, betraying the indignation he was trying to mask. "I'm not implying anything, Dr. Hammond," Dr. Johnson replied, his voice steady. "I'm simply stating that your behavior has been observed, and it doesn't align with the standards of this hospital. We believe in cultivating a work environment where every individual feels valued and supported. If you're unable to meet that standard, then perhaps this isn't the right place for you." A tense silence followed Dr. Johnson's words. The operating room staff, who had been listening with bated breath, exchanged glances, unsure of how Dr. Terry would respond. The surgeon's face turned a deep shade of red, his anger simmering just below the surface. For a moment, Dr. Terry appeared as though he might argue further, but the weight of Dr. Johnson's words seemed to sink in. His shoulders slumped slightly, and he looked away, unable to meet Dr. Johnson's piercing gaze. Dr. Johnson, sensing the shift, softened his tone slightly. "Dr. Hammond, I understand the pressures of surgery better than most. But if you want to thrive here, you'll need to reevaluate how you treat your colleagues. Skill, teamwork, and respect are the foundation of success in this field." With that, Dr. Johnson turned to Martha, offering her a small, reassuring smile before he left the room, leaving Dr. Terry standing in stunned silence. In the days that followed, the incident in the operating room spread through the hospital like wildfire. Staff members whispered in hallways, recounting the confrontation and speculating on what would happen to Dr. Terry. Meanwhile, Martha continued her work, focusing on her patients and refusing to let the event cloud her commitment. She knew her husband's words had left a lasting impact on Dr. Terry, but she wasn't one to dwell on grudges or animosity. To Martha's surprise, however, Dr. Terry's attitude toward her began to change subtly in the days that followed. Though he was still reserved, he no longer barked commands at her or dismissed her suggestions outright. His arrogance had softened slightly, though he remained somewhat distant. Martha sensed that her husband's words had planted a seed of humility within him, a seed that, if nurtured, could lead to genuine growth. A week later, Dr. Terry approached Martha as she was preparing a patient's chart at the nurse's station. He hesitated for a moment, shifting uncomfortably before clearing his throat. "Nurse Johnson," he began, his tone uncharacteristically subdued. I wanted to apologize for my behavior last week. I realize now that I may have been unfair. I didn't mean to undermine your work or question your abilities." Martha looked up, surprised by the unexpected apology. Dr. Terry's expression was a mixture of regret and discomfort, as though the words themselves were foreign to him. But in his eyes, she saw a hint of sincerity, a glimmer of acknowledgement for the pain his words had caused. "Thank you, Dr. Hammond," Martha replied, her tone warm but composed. "I appreciate your apology. We all have difficult days, but I believe in working together to create a positive environment for our patients and for ourselves." Dr. Terry nodded, clearly relieved that she had accepted his apology without bitterness. He lingered for a moment before adding, "And if you ever have any feedback from me, I'd be open to hearing it." A faint smile touched Martha's lips. "I appreciate that, Dr. Hammond. We can always learn from each other." Their conversation was brief, but in that moment, a subtle shift took place. Dr. Terry's arrogance had given way to something far more valuable, a willingness to grow, to confront his biases, and to build genuine respect for those he had once looked down upon. Martha returned to her work, feeling a sense of satisfaction, not from a victory over Dr. Terry, but from the knowledge that perhaps she had played a part in helping him become a better doctor, and, more importantly, a better person. In the weeks and months that followed, Dr. Terry continued to work with Martha and the rest of the nursing staff, gradually shedding the barriers of prejudice that had once clouded his judgment. Through each small interaction, each moment of mutual respect, he found himself growing into the kind of doctor he had once aspired to be, a doctor who didn't just save lives, but also respected the lives and contributions of those who worked alongside him. In the following weeks, the change in Dr. Terry's behavior became more noticeable, though it was subtle enough to escape immediate attention. While he still carried himself with the same strict professionalism, he was less abrupt, more measured in his interactions, and showed a hint of humility that hadn't been there before. Yet, as is often the case with personal transformation, old habits and deep-seated biases aren't easily shed. Dr. Terry's journey toward growth had begun, but there remained hurdles to overcome, and lessons he had yet to learn. It was late one evening, close to the end of a long shift, when Martha was once again called in to assist Dr. Terry on a complicated case. The patient, an elderly woman with a history of heart disease, had been brought in with symptoms of severe abdominal pain. The medical team quickly determined that emergency surgery was needed, as her appendix had ruptured, leading to a life-threatening infection. Dr. Terry scrubbed in, mentally preparing himself for the delicate operation. He was aware of the heightened risks given the patient's age and health condition. When he saw Martha enter the operating room, he felt a pang of discomfort, recalling their past tensions. However, he had come to respect her skills, even if his pride still resisted fully admitting it. "Martha," he said with a nod, acknowledging her presence, Thank you for coming in on short notice. Martha returned his nod with a calm smile. Of course, Dr. Hammond. The patient's in critical condition, so I'll be monitoring her vitals closely. Let me know if you need anything specific from me. The surgery began, and Martha assumed her usual post, seamlessly managing the equipment and maintaining a watchful eye on the monitors. Dr. Terry was focused, his hands moving deftly as he navigated the delicate layers of tissue to access the inflamed appendix. Yet, as the procedure progressed, the patient's vitals began to waver. Her blood pressure dropped suddenly, and her heart rate began to fluctuate erratically. "Pressure's dropping," Martha warned, her voice steady but urgent. "Her heart rate is unstable. We may need to administer additional medication to keep her stabilized." Dr. Terry's jaw tightened as he concentrated, feeling the weight of the situation. He paused briefly to consider his options, but his confidence faltered. His gaze darted to Martha, realizing that she was already preparing the medication. Her calm, efficient response reminded him that he wasn't alone in this room, and that her knowledge and support were critical. "Administer 2 milligrams of epinephrine," he instructed, his voice sounding more respectful than it ever had before. He watched as Martha expertly handled the syringe, administering the dose with practiced precision. Almost immediately, the patient's vitals began to stabilize. Dr. Terry let out a quiet breath of relief, nodding his gratitude to Martha. She acknowledged him with a brief nod of her own, returning her focus to the monitors. It was a moment of unspoken understanding between them, a mutual respect that had taken months to develop. The surgery proceeded without further complications, and soon Dr. Terry was suturing the final incision. The patient's vitals remained steady, and as they completed the procedure, Dr. Terry allowed himself to relax slightly, feeling the tension begin to dissipate. But just as they were about to close the case, a nurse entered the operating room, her face pale and her expression urgent. "Dr. Hammond, there's a situation in the ER that requires immediate surgical attention. We have a young patient, motorcycle accident victim, with severe internal bleeding." Dr. Terry looked at the clock, noting the late hour and the toll the previous surgery had taken on his focus and stamina. He knew he would need assistance to tackle another critical case back to back. Martha, catching his hesitation, immediately stepped forward. "I'll assist you," she said, her voice calm but resolute. "Let's move quickly before the situation deteriorates." Dr. Terry hesitated, a part of him still reluctant to fully rely on her despite the respect he was beginning to develop. But time was of the essence, and he couldn't afford to let his pride endanger a patient's life. He nodded, signaling for Martha to prepare as they scrubbed in for the second time that night. As they entered the ER, they saw the patient, young, unconscious, his body battered and bruised from the impact of the accident. Dr. Terry's instincts kicked in as he assessed the extent of the injuries, issuing rapid instructions to the team. "Martha, monitor his blood pressure and heart rate. I'll start the exploratory laparotomy to locate the source of the bleeding." The next moments were a blur of controlled chaos as Dr. Terry worked to stem the flow of blood. His hands moved swiftly yet carefully, navigating the damaged organs in a race against time. Martha remained focused, stabilizing the patient's vitals and preparing additional supplies as needed. At one point, Dr. Terry encountered a torn artery, a serious complication that would require meticulous work to repair. As he focused on the intricate task, he could feel his concentration wavering slightly. Fatigue from the previous surgery was taking its toll, and his vision blurred momentarily as he fought to keep his hands steady. Martha noticed his struggle and stepped closer, her voice calm and reassuring. "Dr. Hammond, I've got the clamp ready. Just guide me through it, and I'll assist where I can." Dr. Terry felt a pang of gratitude, recognizing that she had anticipated his needs before he even asked. He gave her a brief nod, instructing her on the exact placement of the clamp as she assisted with remarkable precision. Together, they managed to control the bleeding, stabilizing the patient's condition enough to complete the rest of the procedure. By the time they finished, Dr. Terry was visibly exhausted. He glanced at Martha, who, despite the intensity of the past few hours, appeared calm and composed. Her resilience impressed him, and for the first time, he saw her not just as a skilled nurse, but as an equal, a partner who had been essential to saving lives that night. As they removed their gloves and surgical masks, Dr. Terry felt a rare moment of humility wash over him. He looked at Martha, searching for the words to express his gratitude. "Thank you, Martha," he said quietly, his voice carrying a level of sincerity that surprised even him. "I couldn't have managed without you tonight." Martha met his gaze, a slight smile softening her expression. "We're a team, Dr. Hammond. That's what we're here for. None of us do this alone." Dr. Terry nodded, the weight of her words settling in. He realized, perhaps for the first time, that his success as a surgeon depended not just on his skills, but on the support of those around him. The walls he had built around himself, the pride, the prejudices, the need to prove his superiority, suddenly seemed trivial in the face of the life and death challenges they faced together. The ripple of change. News of Dr. Terry's transformation spread quietly through the hospital. Staff members who had once felt intimidated by his arrogance began to notice a change in his demeanor. He was less brusque, more willing to listen, and had even started acknowledging the contributions of others in a way that was both surprising and inspiring. For Martha, the journey with Dr. Terry had been both challenging and rewarding. She had never sought to change him, only to do her job with professionalism and compassion. But her quiet resilience and unwavering dedication had shown him a different path, a way to connect with others that went beyond skill or status. One afternoon, as Martha was reviewing patient charts at her station, Dr. Terry approached her with an unfamiliar expression, one of humility and gratitude. "Martha," he began, his voice uncharacteristically soft, "I wanted to apologize, sincerely. I realize now that I've spent too much of my career focused on being the best, on proving myself, without truly seeing the people around me. You showed me what it means to be a part of a team." Martha looked up, meeting his gaze. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, and for the first time, she felt a sense of closure, a feeling that the animosity between them had finally dissolved. "I appreciate that, Dr. Hammond," she replied, her voice warm and genuine. "Growth is never easy, but you've shown a lot of courage in recognizing it, and I'm glad we could move forward together." Dr. Terry nodded, his face relaxing into a rare smile. "Thank you, Martha. I'm grateful for your patience and for your friendship." From that day forward, Dr. Terry and Martha shared a bond built on mutual respect and trust. Their working relationship became a model for the entire hospital, a testament to the power of humility, empathy, and the courage to grow beyond one's limitations. In time, Dr. Terry became not just a skilled surgeon, but a beloved mentor, guiding younger doctors and nurses with the same compassion he had once overlooked. His transformation was a story shared by staff members, a story that reminded everyone in the hospital that respect, humility, and kindness were as essential as skill in the life-saving work they did. Months passed, and Dr. Terry's transformation continued to ripple through the hospital. His colleagues, especially those who had previously felt alienated by his arrogance, now found him approachable and considerate. Where he once demanded silent obedience, he now encouraged collaboration. It was a profound change that didn't go unnoticed, especially by Dr. Samuel Johnson, who had been quietly observing the evolution of the man he once reprimanded. For Martha, the changes in Dr. Terry were both satisfying and heartening. She had always believed that people were capable of change, even those who seemed most resistant. In her years as a nurse, she had encountered countless personalities, many of whom had grown from abrasive individuals into compassionate caregivers. Dr. Terry was just another example of how life, if allowed, could reshape even the hardest of characters. One day, as she prepared her rounds in the nurse's station, Dr. Terry approached her with a thoughtful look. She smiled, already accustomed to their newfound camaraderie. "Martha," He began, pausing as if considering his words carefully. "I wanted to ask if you'd be willing to take on a special project with me." Her eyebrows lifted in surprise. "A project? What do you have in mind?" He smiled slightly, clearly nervous, a look she hadn't seen on his face before. "I've been thinking a lot about mentorship, about how important it is to guide the younger staff here, especially those who come from different backgrounds. I realized that I could have used someone like you in my early years, someone to show me what real teamwork looks like. And I think this hospital could benefit from a mentorship program for young nurses and doctors." Martha was pleasantly surprised. She had always advocated for mentoring programs and for more opportunities to build connections between the staff. "That sounds like a wonderful idea, Dr. Hammond. I'd love to help. What do you envision for this program?" "I'd like us to work with young interns, residents, and even nursing students who are just beginning their careers here. We could help them navigate the challenges, both in terms of skills and interpersonal dynamics." Dr. Terry looked at her with a spark of enthusiasm she hadn't seen before. "I've realized that people often come here feeling unsure, even intimidated. And sometimes they face challenges that go beyond just learning their jobs. I'd like to help them, to make sure they feel supported from the start." Martha nodded, feeling a swell of pride at seeing the once arrogant doctor genuinely committed to fostering inclusivity. "I think this program could be just what the hospital needs, especially for those who come from diverse backgrounds. I know what it's like to feel out of place in an unfamiliar environment." Dr. Terry nodded, understanding that her experience as a woman of color in the medical field had likely presented challenges he had never encountered. "I want this program to address those kinds of struggles as well. I'll be honest, I have a lot to learn in that area. But I'm willing to listen, to adapt, and to make sure everyone here feels respected." Over the next few weeks, Dr. Terry and Martha worked tirelessly to develop the mentorship program. They named it the Bridge Program, representing the connections they hoped to build across different levels and roles in the hospital. Together, they created a structure where experienced staff members could volunteer as mentors, guiding young professionals not only in clinical skills, but also in navigating the pressures and biases that often emerged in such high-stakes environments. Their work became a passion project, and soon the Bridge Program gained traction among the hospital staff. Word spread quickly, and soon the program had attracted the interest of both interns and seasoned professionals eager to contribute. Dr. Terry and Martha worked closely, conducting orientation sessions, setting up group discussions, and even organizing workshops on topics like teamwork, empathy, and stress management. One evening, as they wrapped up a particularly successful workshop, Dr. Terry and Martha found themselves sitting in the hospital's quiet cafeteria, savoring a rare moment of calm. "Martha," Dr. Terry began, stirring his coffee thoughtfully, "I wanted to thank you. This program wouldn't have come to life without you. And frankly, I don't think I would have had the courage to face some of my own blind spots if it weren't for you." Martha smiled warmly, taking the sip of her tea. "You've done more than you realize, Dr. Hammond. Growth takes courage. The fact that you're here, investing in something that benefits others, is a testament to how much you've changed." He smiled, but his expression grew serious. "There's something else I want to share with you, something personal. I think I owe you that much." She looked at him with curiosity and a hint of concern. "Of course. What is it?" He took a deep breath, clearly wrestling with his words. "I wasn't always like this. Arrogant, I mean. When I first started my career, I was idealistic, eager to make a difference. But over time, I faced setbacks, failures, and personal losses. My wife passed away shortly after we had our daughter, and I suppose I threw myself into my work as a way of coping. I became harder, more distant, as a way to protect myself from feeling vulnerable." Martha listened quietly, her heart softening as he shared his story. She had never imagined the pain that lay beneath his rigid exterior, the losses that had shaped him in ways he hadn't fully understood. "When my wife died, I felt like I lost a part of myself," he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. I thought if I focused on being the best, on achieving perfection, maybe I could fill that emptiness. But it didn't work. It only made me harder, angrier. I pushed people away, and I built walls around myself without even realizing it. Martha reached across the table, placing a comforting hand on his. "Dr. Hammond, I had no idea. I'm so sorry for your loss. That kind of pain is something no one should face alone." Dr. Terry looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Martha. I know I've been difficult. I know I've caused pain. But through this program, and through working with you, I'm starting to feel like I'm finally reconnecting with the doctor and the person I used to be." Martha squeezed his hand gently. "It's never too late to find your way back, Dr. Hammond. And you're not alone. You have people who support you, who believe in you." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of his confession settling between them. For Dr. Terry, this vulnerability was a rare gift, a moment of catharsis that marked a turning point in his life. And for Martha, it was a reminder of the strength that came from compassion, the power of empathy to heal even the deepest wounds. The launch of the Bridge program. The Bridge program officially launched in the hospital with great success. It became a sanctuary for young professionals who needed guidance, a place where they could share their fears and seek advice without judgment. Dr. Terry and Martha became respected figures in the program, their partnership a symbol of resilience and mutual respect. One of the program's first participants was a young nurse named Louis, who had recently moved from a small town and was struggling to adjust to the fast-paced hospital environment. Louis often felt overwhelmed and out of place, his confidence shaken by the unfamiliar surroundings and the pressure of working in a high-stakes medical setting. Dr. Terry, recognizing something of his younger self in Louis, took him under his wing, guiding him through difficult cases and teaching him how to navigate the pressures of the job. With Martha's encouragement, he also shared some of his own struggles with Louis, helping the young nurse see that vulnerability was not a weakness but a pathway to growth. Under their mentorship, Louis blossomed, becoming more confident and capable with each passing day. He grew into his role with the support of the Bridge program, and his success became a testament to the program's impact on both mentees and mentors alike. Martha and Dr. Terry continued to lead the program together, their partnership evolving into a lasting friendship. They became a source of inspiration for others, a reminder that change was possible and that the strength of a team lay not in perfection, but in mutual support and respect. A legacy of compassion. As the years passed, the Bridge program grew, eventually expanding to other hospitals in the region. Dr. Terry and Martha became known for their work in fostering a culture of empathy and inclusivity, and their legacy continued to inspire future generations of healthcare professionals. Dr. Terry, once known for his arrogance, was now respected as a mentor, a leader, and a compassionate doctor who had faced his own biases and emerged transformed. And Martha, whose quiet strength had been the catalyst for his change, continued her work with grace and humility, never seeking recognition, but always making a difference. Together, they had built something far greater than a program. They had built a legacy of compassion. A reminder that, no matter our backgrounds or experiences, we all have the capacity to grow, to learn, and to heal. Years passed, and the Bridge program evolved into one of Memorial Hospital's most celebrated initiatives. What began as a mentorship program designed to foster teamwork and empathy within the walls of the hospital had grown into a movement that extended beyond Memorial's boundaries. Soon, other hospitals and healthcare institutions took notice, implementing their versions of the program, inspired by the success and impact of the original. The program had not only transformed individuals but reshaped entire organizational cultures, promoting inclusivity and mutual respect across the board. Dr. Terry Hammond, now a senior figure within the hospital, became a keynote speaker at medical conferences, often invited to share his journey and insights on creating respectful, empathetic work environments. The once impenetrable walls he had built around himself had long since crumbled, replaced by a humility and vulnerability that inspired those around him. Martha, still as dedicated as ever, continued to be his partner in the program. Together, they shared the stage at these conferences, recounting the story of how a single encounter in an operating room had transformed not only their lives, but the lives of countless others. To the audiences, they were not merely colleagues but symbols of resilience and reconciliation. They became a testament to the idea that change was possible, even in those who seemed most set in their ways. The Anniversary Gala. In celebration of the 10th anniversary of the Bridge program, Memorial Hospital organized a gala, a grand event to honor the achievements of the program and the people who had made it possible. The hospital's auditorium was filled with staff members, mentors, mentees, former patients, and even members of the community who had been positively impacted by the work of Dr. Terry, Martha, and the team. Dr. Johnson, now semi-retired but still very much a part of the hospital's heart, was invited as the evening's guest of honor. He smiled with quiet pride as he took in the sight of his wife and Dr. Terry mingling with attendees, seeing the legacy they had created together. It was a far cry from the early days when he had to step in to remind Dr. Terry of the importance of respect and humility. Now that same man was celebrated not just for his medical expertise, but for his dedication to building a culture of kindness and inclusivity. As the evening progressed, Dr. Johnson took to the stage to deliver a speech. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his voice resonant and warm. "Tonight, we're here to celebrate more than just a program. We're here to honor the power of change, the strength of humility, and the beauty of collaboration." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the audience. 10 years ago, we witnessed the start of something remarkable, a partnership between two individuals whose journey taught us all valuable lessons about growth and compassion. And as I look around this room, I see the countless lives touched by their work, by their courage to challenge the status quo, and by their commitment to creating a supportive environment for everyone. He turned toward Dr. Terry and Martha, his smile softening. "Dr. Hammond, Martha, you've given this hospital more than a mentorship program. You've given us a legacy, a reminder that no matter who we are or where we come from, we all have a role to play in supporting each other." The audience erupted into applause as Dr. Johnson stepped down from the stage. Dr. Terry and Martha exchanged a smile, both humbled by the recognition. In that moment, they were reminded of the countless hours, the struggles, and the triumphs that had brought them to this point. A new opportunity. As the gala continued, Dr. Terry found himself approached by a woman in her 30s, dressed in a tailored suit, her gaze warm and inquisitive. She introduced herself as Dr. Elena Vasquez, the director of a prominent research institute in a neighboring city. "Dr. Hammond," she began, extending her hand, "I wanted to say how much your story inspired me. I read about the Bridge program years ago, and I've always admired the work you and Martha have done. I've been looking for ways to foster a similar environment at our institute, and I think there's a lot we can learn from you." Dr. Terry shook her hand, smiling. "Thank you, Dr. Vasquez. It's humbling to know the program has had an impact beyond our hospital." She smiled, her eyes bright with an idea. "Actually, I was wondering if you'd be open to collaborating with us on a larger scale. We're planning to launch an inter-hospital mentorship initiative to bring healthcare professionals together and share best practices. It would be a way to connect medical institutions and create a unified culture of respect, empathy, and professional support." The proposal took Dr. Terry by surprise. Though he'd seen the impact of the Bridge program grow over the years, he hadn't considered expanding it to such a level. But as he glanced over at Martha, who was deep in conversation with a group of young nurses, he realized the potential of such a partnership. The program that had started as a bridge between two people could now become a bridge across hospitals, even communities. Dr. Terry nodded, a spark of excitement igniting within him. "I'd be honored, Dr. Vasquez. Let's discuss this further. I believe we could make a real difference." Reflections. After the gala, Dr. Terry and Martha took a walk around the hospital grounds, the night air crisp and filled with the distant hum of city life. The hospital had grown over the years, adding new wings and state-of-the-art technology. Yet for them, it was the people within its walls that truly defined its legacy. "It's strange, isn't it?" Dr. Terry mused, glancing at the towering hospital building. "If you had told me a decade ago that I'd be working on a mentorship program and advocating for empathy, I'd have laughed." Martha chuckled softly. "Yes, you might have. But look at how far you've come. The journey hasn't been easy, but it's been worth every step." Dr. Terry nodded, his expression contemplative. "I used to think success was about being the best, about accolades and respect. But I've learned that true success lies in the connections we build and the lives we touch along the way." Martha smiled, her gaze warm. "That's a lesson many never learn. You've become a mentor not just in medicine, but in life. And that's something far more valuable." They continued their walk in comfortable silence, each reflecting on the journey they had shared. For Dr. Terry, the past 10 years had been a time of deep transformation, a journey from arrogance to empathy, from isolation to connection. And as he looked at the hospital, a place that had once felt like a fortress of pressure and expectation, he now saw it as a sanctuary of growth, a place where people could come together and lift each other up. A new chapter. With the plans for the Inter-Hospital Mentorship Initiative underway, Dr. Terry and Martha found themselves busier than ever. The program, now rebranded as the Healthcare Bridges Initiative, began to expand into nearby hospitals, connecting healthcare professionals from different institutions in a network of support and shared learning. They held joint workshops, shared resources, and created mentorship pairs across hospitals, fostering a spirit of collaboration that transcended institutional boundaries. Dr. Terry and Martha became well-known figures within the initiative, their story often shared as an example of how compassion and humility could transform even the most hardened of individuals. They continued to work closely, a partnership built not just on shared goals, but on genuine respect and friendship. One afternoon, during a break in one of their workshops, Dr. Terry turned to Martha, his gaze thoughtful. "Martha, have you ever considered writing about this experience? About the Bridge program, the challenges we faced, and the things we've learned?" Martha looked at him, intrigued. "I hadn't thought about it, but it could be a way to share our journey with others, to reach people who may be struggling with similar challenges." Dr. Terry nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "I think it's a story worth telling, and I'd be honored to tell it with you." They spent the next several months working on their book together, recounting the events that had brought them to this point and the lessons they had learned. It became not only a story of personal growth, but a guide for others, filled with practical advice on building empathy, fostering teamwork, and creating supportive work environments. Their book, titled Bridges of Compassion, A Journey of Transformation in Healthcare, became a bestseller in medical communities, praised for its honest portrayal of the challenges and rewards of healthcare work. It was a testament to the power of change, a reminder that even the most difficult journeys could lead to unexpected rewards. A legacy carried forward. As the years went by, Dr. Terry and Martha gradually reduced their hours at the hospital, handing over the reins of the Bridge program to a new generation of mentors. Yet their legacy endured. The program continued to thrive, reaching new institutions and inspiring countless individuals to carry forward the spirit of empathy and respect. Dr. Terry and Martha remained close friends, often meeting to reminisce about their journey and to offer guidance to the younger mentors. And as they looked back on their years together, they felt a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing that they had left the world a little kinder, a little more compassionate, and a little more connected. In the end, they realized that their greatest achievement was not in the lives they saved in the operating room, but in the lives they touched through their compassion and humility. Their journey had been one of transformation, a lesson in the power of empathy to break down barriers and build bridges that would stand the test of time. With the success of the Healthcare Bridges Initiative and their book, Bridges of Compassion, A Journey of Transformation in Healthcare, Dr. Terry and Martha found themselves invited to speak at medical conferences, universities, and leadership seminars. They had become known for their story, a tale not only of professional triumph but of personal growth, resilience, and the redemptive power of empathy. Their partnership was legendary in the healthcare community, a model of how bridging differences could lead to profound, lasting impact. But their journey wasn't over. One day, Dr. Terry received a letter that would open an entirely new chapter for both him and Martha. The letter was from the dean of a renowned medical school, Dr. Laura Chen, inviting Dr. Terry and Martha to lead a new initiative, a fellowship program designed to teach future healthcare leaders the skills and values they had championed. The program, named the Compassionate Leadership Fellowship, would bring together aspiring doctors, nurses, and healthcare administrators to learn the principles of empathetic leadership and collaborative care. The invitation surprised Dr. Terry, stirring a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. For years, he and Martha had been at the helm of the Bridge program and its expansions, but this was something new, a chance to shape the next generation of healthcare leaders from the ground up. That evening, he called Martha to discuss the invitation. They met at their favorite coffee shop, a quiet, cozy place where they had often gathered to reflect on their journey. Martha listened intently as he shared the details of the letter, her eyes alight with interest. "This is an incredible opportunity, Terry. Imagine the impact we could have, shaping young leaders from the very start of their careers. We could help them avoid some of the mistakes we made and teach them the value of empathy and respect before they ever step into a hospital." Dr. Terry nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "I agree. But it's a huge commitment. We'd be training fellows for months at a time, guiding them through intensive workshops and real-world practice. And it would mean stepping back from our work at the hospital." Martha placed a hand on his arm, her expression warm. "Terry, the hospital will always be a part of us. But maybe this is where we're needed now. We've built something lasting with the Bridge program. This fellowship could be the next step." He looked at her, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. Martha had become not just a colleague or even a friend, but a true partner in his life's work. With her encouragement, he felt a renewed sense of purpose, a call to action that was as compelling as the early days of the Bridge program. They both decided to accept the invitation, embarking on a new journey together. The start of the fellowship. The Compassionate Leadership Fellowship launched the following year, and Dr. Terry and Martha became co-directors. They crafted a curriculum that combined hands-on clinical training with leadership workshops focused on communication, emotional intelligence, cultural competency, and ethical decision-making. The program's goal was clear: to train healthcare professionals who were not only skilled in their fields, but also deeply committed to treating their patients, colleagues, and communities with respect and empathy. Their first cohort consisted of a select group of residents, nurses, and administrators from diverse backgrounds. Among them were individuals who had faced significant adversity, first-generation medical students, those from underrepresented communities, and others who had encountered discrimination or bias in their careers. Dr. Terry and Martha saw these fellows as pioneers, the vanguard of a new era in healthcare. On the first day, Dr. Terry stood before the group, feeling a mix of excitement and trepidation. Gone was the arrogance of his earlier years. In its place was a quiet confidence born from experience and humility. He shared his story, recounting his early days of arrogance, the painful lessons he had learned, and the transformation that had led him to this moment. "I'm not here to tell you that I was always the compassionate leader I am today," he admitted, his voice steady but heartfelt. "In fact, I spent much of my early career believing that skill alone was enough. But I was wrong. The truth is, no matter how skilled we are, no matter how much we know, we're only as strong as the connections we build with others." Martha then spoke, her voice warm and reassuring. "In this fellowship, we're going to challenge you, not just to be good at your jobs, but to be kind, to be patient, and to see the humanity in everyone you encounter. We believe that compassion is a skill, one that requires practice and dedication, just like any other. And it's a skill that will make you better professionals and better people. The fellows listened intently, visibly moved by their words. The room was filled with an energy that spoke of hope, of a shared commitment to creating something meaningful and lasting. Transformative experiences. As the fellowship progressed, Dr. Terry and Martha guided the fellows through immersive experiences designed to build empathy and resilience. They held role-playing sessions where fellows had to navigate difficult conversations with patients and colleagues. They led workshops on cultural sensitivity, inviting guest speakers from various communities to share their perspectives on healthcare disparities and the importance of understanding patients' unique backgrounds. One of the most powerful exercises was called In Their Shoes, an experiential simulation where fellows were assigned roles based on real-life patient scenarios. They were given limited resources and faced a series of challenges, including navigating complex medical procedures without family support or facing implicit bias based on their assigned identity. The exercise left a profound impact on the fellows. Afterward, they gathered in a circle to debrief, sharing how the experience had altered their understanding of what patients and colleagues from marginalized backgrounds might endure. A young fellow named Priya, who had been assigned the role of a single mother facing a chronic illness, spoke through tears. "I thought I understood what my patients go through, but I didn't. This exercise made me see things from a perspective I'd never considered. I realize now how important it is to listen, to really listen, and to advocate for my patients, especially those who feel overlooked." Dr. Terry nodded, recognizing the sincerity in her words. That's the heart of compassionate leadership, Priya. It's not about fixing every problem or having all the answers. It's about being willing to see people as they are, with all their struggles, and standing by them. That's how we make a difference. Martha's legacy. One day, midway through the fellowship's first year, Martha received unexpected news. The state medical board announced that she would be receiving an award for her contributions to healthcare, a Lifetime Achievement Award in recognition of her unwavering dedication, her work with the Bridge program, and her leadership in the Compassionate Leadership Fellowship. The award ceremony was held at the state capitol, a grand event attended by healthcare leaders from across the region. Dr. Terry, the fellows, and much of the hospital staff traveled to show their support. As Martha took the stage to receive her award, she looked out at the audience, her heart filled with gratitude and pride. In her acceptance speech, she reflected on her journey. "This award is an honor, but it's not mine alone. It belongs to everyone who has stood by me, to those who taught me, challenged me, and inspired me along the way. I believe that the true measure of success is not in what we achieve alone, but in what we build together. And I am deeply grateful to have been a part of something that has brought us all closer." She paused, looking directly at Dr. Terry in the audience. "I've learned that the best leaders are those who never stop learning, who are willing to change, and who strive to lift others up. Thank you to everyone who has been a part of this journey, especially my friend and partner, Dr. Terry Hammond. Together, we've shown that compassion is not just a virtue, it's a legacy." The audience erupted into applause, and Dr. Terry felt his chest tighten with emotion. Martha's words were a powerful reminder of everything they had accomplished and everything they had yet to achieve. He knew that her legacy would live on, not only in the award but in the countless lives she had touched. A future built on compassion. The Compassionate Leadership Fellowship continued to thrive, with more hospitals and medical schools joining the initiative each year. Dr. Terry and Martha became mentors to a new generation of healthcare leaders who carried their message of empathy, resilience, and respect forward. The fellows graduated with a unique set of skills, entering the healthcare field not only as capable professionals but as compassionate advocates for their patients and communities. As the years passed, Dr. Terry and Martha gradually shifted into advisory roles, ensuring the fellowship's continuity and watching with pride as their vision was carried on by others. Their work had become more than just a program. It was a movement, a culture of care that redefined the standards of healthcare. In their later years, Dr. Terry and Martha often reflected on their journey together, marveling at the paths their lives had taken. They had both grown in ways they never anticipated, finding strength and vulnerability and purpose in each other's friendship. Their partnership had transformed not only their lives, but the lives of everyone who crossed their paths. One evening, as they sat together on a bench outside the hospital, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Dr. Terry turned to Martha. "We've done something remarkable, haven't we?" he said, his voice filled with quiet wonder. Martha smiled, her gaze soft. "Yes, Terry, we have. And the best part, it doesn't end with us. Our work will live on in every person we've touched, in every fellow, every patient, every life changed." Dr. Terry nodded, feeling a deep sense of peace. "Thank you, Martha, for everything." They sat in comfortable silence, two souls bound by a shared purpose, watching the sun set on one chapter and rise on a legacy it would endure for generations to come. As the years continued to unfold, Dr. Terry and Martha became even more deeply intertwined with the culture and legacy of the Compassionate Leadership Fellowship, solidifying their impact on the healthcare community. But their contributions would come to mean even more than they imagined, as unforeseen challenges and new opportunities arose that would test their commitment, resilience, and vision. A personal loss. 3 years after Martha received her Lifetime Achievement Award, the hospital community was struck by a profound loss. Dr. Samuel Johnson, Martha's husband, and a beloved figure in the hospital, passed away peacefully after a brief illness. Dr. Johnson had been a beacon of compassion and wisdom, not only to Martha, but to everyone who had known him. His passing left a significant void in the lives of those he'd guided, including Dr. Terry, who had come to see Dr. Johnson as a mentor and friend. The loss was hardest on Martha. She had known Samuel since her earliest days in nursing school, and he had been her unwavering support, her confidant, and her closest partner. His absence left her heart aching with grief that no professional accolades or achievements could fill. For the first time in years, she found herself questioning her purpose, feeling adrift in a world without the man who had been her rock. During this period, Dr. Terry became a source of support for her. Where once she had been the one to offer strength and wisdom, Dr. Terry now found himself filling that role for her, drawing on everything he had learned from their years of partnership. "Martha," he said one evening as they sat together in her home, surrounded by memories of Dr. Johnson, "you're not alone. Samuel may not be with us physically, but everything he taught us, every lesson, every kindness, it's still here, in us, and in the work we do. The best way to honor him is to keep moving forward, to continue building what he believed in." Martha looked at Dr. Terry, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and gratitude. "You're right, Terry. Samuel always believed in the power of legacy, of leaving something good behind. I know he'd want me to continue our work." She paused, her voice catching. "And I'm grateful to have you by my side." They embraced, two friends bound by loss and purpose, and in that moment, Martha felt a renewed sense of determination. She knew Samuel's legacy lived on through their work, through the Bridge program, and through the Compassionate Leadership Fellowship. An invitation to teach. Several months after Dr. Johnson's passing, Martha received another unexpected invitation. The medical school that had initially invited her and Dr. Terry to establish the fellowship now extended a proposal for Martha to join their faculty as a visiting professor. They wanted her to develop a course on compassionate care, one that would become a cornerstone of their curriculum for students entering the healthcare profession. Martha, initially uncertain, shared the offer with Dr. Terry, who encouraged her to accept. "Martha," he said, his voice full of conviction, "you've been teaching compassion your entire life. This is an opportunity to reach students who are still shaping their identities as caregivers. Imagine the lives you could influence." Martha reflected on his words, knowing that Dr. Johnson would have been thrilled to see her expand her work in this way. After some consideration, she accepted the offer, splitting her time between the hospital and the medical school. Her classes quickly became among the most popular on campus. Students were drawn not only to her expertise, but to the genuine warmth and understanding she brought to her lessons. She shared her own experiences, recounting moments from the Bridge program, the Compassionate Leadership Fellowship, and the countless encounters that had shaped her career. One day, a young medical student approached her after class. "Professor Johnson, your story about the Bridge program, it really resonated with me. I've always felt like an outsider, and hearing how you and Dr. Hammond built a program that supports everyone, no matter their background, gave me hope." Martha smiled, feeling a familiar warmth spread through her. "Thank you for sharing that with me. Remember, healthcare is more than just treating illnesses. It's about seeing people, understanding them, and building connections. If you carry that with you, you'll make an incredible difference." As she watched her students grow and develop, Martha found herself reinvigorated, her purpose restored. Dr. Johnson's memory and values guided her every step, and she felt that, in her way, she was passing on his legacy to a new generation, a new partnership with the community. Meanwhile, Dr. Terry was approached by a group of community leaders interested in forming a coalition with the hospital to address healthcare disparities. The coalition would focus on preventive care, access to services, and support for underrepresented communities, issues that Dr. Terry had come to recognize as vital through his work in the Compassionate Leadership Fellowship. The initiative was ambitious, requiring collaboration with local clinics, schools, and community centers to improve healthcare literacy and provide free medical screenings. Dr. Terry and Martha, as co-directors of the fellowship, threw themselves into the project, enlisting the help of fellows and alumni who were passionate about giving back to the community. As they conducted free health clinics in underserved neighborhoods, Dr. Terry and Martha witnessed firsthand the impact of their work. They saw patients who had never before received medical attention, children who were learning about healthy habits for the first time, and families who felt empowered to advocate for their own health. During one of these clinics, a young mother approached Dr. Terry with tears in her eyes. "Thank you, doctor. I didn't think anyone cared about people like us. I don't have insurance, and this is the first time I've felt like my health matters." Her words struck a chord with him, reminding him why he had chosen to become a doctor in the first place. For so many years, he had focused on status and expertise, forgetting the fundamental reason for his calling: to serve. And now, standing in the heart of the community, he felt the fulfillment that had once eluded him. Together, Dr. Terry and Martha continued to build partnerships, using the coalition to train fellows and teach them the importance of community-based care. Through their efforts, the hospital began to expand its role in the community, becoming a place where everyone felt welcomed and valued. Honoring a legacy. A few years later, as Dr. Terry and Martha were both preparing for retirement, the hospital board approached them with a proposal. They wanted to dedicate a new wing of the hospital to the Bridge program and the Compassionate Leadership Fellowship, honoring the legacy that Dr. Terry and Martha had built over the years. The new wing would house the fellowship's offices, mentoring rooms, and a space for community outreach programs, symbolizing the lasting impact of their work. At the dedication ceremony, both Dr. Terry and Martha were asked to speak. Standing before the crowd, Dr. Terry felt a deep sense of pride and gratitude. He thought back to the man he had once been, a man whose arrogance had nearly driven him to isolation, and he marveled at the transformation he had undergone. "Today," he began, his voice steady and strong, "we celebrate more than just a building. We celebrate a vision of healthcare that values not only the skills and knowledge of our staff, but their compassion and their humanity. I was once a man who believed that skill alone defined my worth. But through the people around me, especially Martha Johnson, I learned that true strength lies in our ability to connect, to listen, and to support one another." He paused, looking over at Martha, who was watching him with a warm smile. "This wing, this program, this fellowship, they are not just legacies of two individuals. They are legacies of everyone who has believed in kindness, in respect, and in the power of compassion." Martha stepped forward, her voice gentle but filled with conviction. When we started this journey, we had no idea how far it would take us. But what we've learned along the way is that healthcare is about more than just healing the body. It's about healing the heart and mind. This program is for everyone who believes in that vision, and it will continue to grow because of the people who are part of it. The crowd erupted in applause, and as Dr. Terry and Martha looked around, they saw familiar faces. Former fellows, mentees, patients, and friends, all gathered to celebrate the legacy they had created together. A lasting impact. After the dedication, Dr. Terry and Martha gradually stepped back from their daily roles, entrusting the Bridge program and the Compassionate Leadership Fellowship to a new generation of leaders. They remained advisors, always available to offer guidance and support, but they found comfort in watching their vision thrive without them, knowing it was in capable hands. In their retirement, they stayed connected, often meeting for coffee or to attend the fellowship's annual graduation ceremonies. They traveled together to visit other hospitals that had adopted the program, finding joy in seeing how their legacy had taken root in places they had never even imagined. As they looked back on their careers, they felt a profound sense of fulfillment. They had each embarked on a journey that had transformed them, learning that humility, empathy, and kindness were the true measures of success. They had created something that would outlive them, something that would continue to touch lives for generations. On one of their last visits to the hospital, they walked through the wing dedicated to the fellowship, marveling at how vibrant and alive it was. Young doctors and nurses bustled about, meeting with mentors, discussing patient cases, and sharing ideas. Dr. Terry and Martha felt a shared pride, knowing that they had played a part in shaping these future leaders. As they walked out of the hospital for what might be the last time, Dr. Terry turned to Martha, his face filled with gratitude. "We've done something beautiful, haven't we?" Martha nodded, her eyes misty but smiling. "Yes, Terry, we've built something beautiful, and we did it together." They embraced, knowing that their friendship, their partnership, and their legacy would endure. They had learned that compassion was not just an ideal but a way of life, a choice that required courage, humility, and love. And as they walked into the sunset of their careers, they carried with them the knowledge that they had made a difference that would echo through the lives of everyone they had touched, forever.